Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of the RocketMSP Podcast. Let me get my microphone a little closer here. Hi, I'm Steve Taylor. I'm your host. Today I'm joined by Rob Turner from Leadfoot Technology Group. And Rob, I'm sorry, man. I owe you an apology because I'd love to blame somebody else or autocorrect, but when I made the graphic, I did not double check for any grammatical errors, and apparently I've been advertising Lead Food Technology Group for weeks. I'm sorry, man.
It's okay. I talked to a partner about it this morning, and luckily one of our guys that we've worked with in the past as a contractor pointed it out to us, so I was able to tell you. But it's a great conversation piece because as we all try to go faster, it's easier to make more mistakes, and
It sure is.
it's kind of synergistic with why we exist anyway. So no problem.
All right. Well, so Leadfoot Technology Group. I think I gave you a hard time about your logo.
Yeah.
Because Leadfoot, I think of the someone driving fast, right? They're pedal to the metal, but then you've got like a foot with wings for the
Yes.
logo.
Yes.
So can you explain that?
Yeah, so I'm really glad we got to have that conversation last time because it helped go back into our marketing, and I think you may have seen some things tweaked because of that. We've dealt with a lot of different companies with different mindsets, and sometimes the simplest things are the hardest. The simpler you can make something, the more effort went in the background. So what our goal was with the concept was, we know people want to go faster. Businesses need to go faster. Productivity needs to be faster. And that can be overwhelming to a lot of people. And we help do the heavy lifting. And it was great talking with you about that because once you got what we were trying to do, you gave us that feedback. And that's kind of what our concept is. Everything we do is to help our customers go faster.
And so can you tell me a little bit about what Leadfoot Technology Group does, like big picture?
Yeah. So we have a deep history in working with OEM technologies that you would traditionally find in bigger products as a checkbox. And while we've got some awesome experiences there, what we found is a lot of the MSP partners that I've worked with in the past, they don't know that these things exist already that can help them directly. So they don't have to wait on a product to get to market. They don't have to buy it from someone else. They can use it and control the margin on that themselves.
Okay. And like, what kind of technology are we talking about? Like, you gonna get me a MacBook Pro that's my own brand? Like,
No. So SD-WAN or software-defined networking, it's unfortunately been kind of a contaminated marketing word for a while now. But there's really three subsets of technology in the group that we work with that is SD-WAN. It makes your applications more resilient to failover by actually combining two completely different internet connections. WAN optimization accelerates, deduplicates, and optimizes the connection. So you can do 10 times as much with the bandwidth that you have, whether it's combined with an SD-WAN product or not. Netify is a network diagnostic tool that can give you some deep packet inspection type of visibility so that you can apply those other two technologies the right way so that it's not just one size fits all. And we find that a lot of people ask the same exact question, but which one applies best to them as a solution is completely dependent on the scenario they've got. And we use Netify to help guide us with the other two products and give us concrete reasons to use the products versus just throwing it out there.
okay. So what you're basically saying is I don't have to go to some of these I'll just say hardware companies that are offering SD-WAN type services and claiming that they're going to make the internet faster, safer, better,
Right.
stronger, whatever, right? We can just come to you and we can build our own.
You can build your own in the sense you want to integrate these three different ways. We've got different customers integrating them different ways. Sometimes it's dependent on a billing system that they want to integrate it with, or a product or a piece of hardware that they want to combine two of the three things on. So while that's definitely an option, all three of them stand alone as individual pieces. So having the ability to deploy those without the big upfront commitments, for one, and also not being roped into something that has a long-term commitment. That's part of why we started this,
And this also, does this give me the, I'll say, freedom to start using like whatever hardware I want to use?
Yeah, if you have a little black box, we've worked with Lanner and Quotom, and a lot of the vendors that if you have 1,000 sites, you can become an OEM partner for them, and you can deploy this software on that type of hardware yourself. If you need someone to manage parts of it in the cloud so that you just worry about deploying a client on your Windows or Mac, that's fine too. Most of these things are bookshelf solutions. So while a component does need to sit in the data center somewhere, the other side, the CPE side, it can be on a device of your choice. But in the case of like Replify, it can reside directly on your Windows or Mac or Android device, which is huge to get WAN optimization in a software-only client mode. You can probably think of a lot of people that would help. So you don't have to put something in line to your existing network. You don't have to change anything.
All right, so I'm gonna write that down. Replify software to optimize WAN, because I need to come back to that. But first, I need to step back because I'll be honest, I don't know exactly what you wizards are selling with SD-WAN. Okay, because when I when I looked into this stuff, excuse me, a while back, I remember there was this company that a lot of MSPs were starting to kind of gravitate towards, and they basically said that they're able to QoS, quality of service, the whole internet.
Mm-hmm.
So they're providing QoS to the whole internet. And like when I saw the demo, like it was a colleague of mine. He basically opened up like, I don't know, 100 tabs of YouTube and let them all load, and just you got to see all of them load the video and then everything else. Like you could tell it's not that it just like reorganized and reprioritized what things it thinks you want to get to first.
Sure.
Is that SD-WAN?
Okay, so before we talk about QoS or any features on top of the base underlying component, SD-WAN is not just a dual WAN CPE function that sits on the customer site that can use ISP1 and ISP2. While that's a decent level of fault tolerance, there's no concept there of splitting packets over both connections or detecting anomalies on one connection and preferring the other. There's no resiliency there. If one goes down, your VoIP call is going to be interrupted. It may only be for a few seconds for things to re-register. It may be a minute, 60 seconds, depending on the firewall you're using. But that happens if that connection's interrupted, congested, or anything, whether you need QoS, any of those reasons. So SD-WAN is a way to connect two completely independent connections to a controller or a primary and a secondary controller in the cloud so that your public IP is actually there. That's what all the cloud services of today will actually see. They'll see that public IP that's provisioned in the cloud, and you might have two different pathway to get back and forth, and that CPE manages all that complex logic. If it's routing partial stuff over one or the other, you've got 10 meg and 20 meg connections that you're bonding together. You can actually get 30 meg because it's bonded. It's actually bonded.
Okay.
A dual WAN connection that's not truly a SD-WAN solution, you're only going to be able to get a max TCP stream of your highest link.
Your fastest.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you had 20 meg and 10 meg, you'll only be able to get 20 megabit per second per thread. And you'll be able to aggregate to 30, but you'll still have this disruption if things go down. So for businesses using VoIP, anything that is, time sensitive, that's where SD-WAN really shines. Live streaming, things like this. This context right here would be a perfect application for you to have the Ethica-based cloud access product that if one connection went down, there's nothing observed with the stream itself. You can go in later and see graphs and things about the event, some uptime. You can say, wow, that saved 5 minutes of jumping through hoops to get our podcast back up and going, having to reestablish a connection. That's what SD-WAN is. That at its core, anything layered on top of that, whether it's QoS in either direction, WAN optimization, any of these other features, that's what SD-WAN is really supposed to be about. So
that company, not that they misled me, but they were just only using a portion of what SD-WAN is capable of.
Sure.
And then adding features and services on top of that to make a marketable product. Is that basically?
I don't know who you're talking about, so I can't give a technical assessment for sure, but I see that a lot. And the products that do actual SD-WAN, like we're talking about, your VeloClouds, your Viptelas, the big guys, you're either buying it through an ISP that's trying to upsell one of the circuits as their own with an SD-WAN product on the back end in their own data center, but you're paying them margin. They're in control of that solution, and you have just access to it. And it's not cheap, because they're competing against, MPLS type of solutions, if you will. But there are some guys that see it as a few different things, whether it's automated VPN, whether it's MPLS replacement. The guys really doing SD-WAN, they're not cheap to start with. And that's part of what we're trying to change. It shouldn't take a huge uplift to get started with these technologies.
So I just want to clarify, I'm not putting these guys down or saying they're doing something wrong or anything along those lines. I'm simply just trying to say, I don't understand what they're doing versus what you're talking about, etc. So you've heard of OmniNet, formerly My Digital Shield, right?
I am absolutely familiar with OmniNet and the underlying technology.
So their website says SASE/Elastic UTM meets SD-WAN.
Yeah.
I have no idea what words just came out of my mouth or what they mean. Rob, please help me.
Man, you ever see Good Morning Vietnam with that scene where
it's been a long time.
Well, that acronym SOUP is common, and Unified Threat Management. SD-WAN does not mean that you don't need a firewall. You're still going to have your Fortinet or Ubiquity or whatever platform you choose for your firewall behind it. Now, small scenarios you can deploy it without it, but this is more meant as a way for MSPs to get into the networking game. They don't have to be dependent on an agreement with an ISP treating them as a channel partner and giving them single digit percentages or type of thing. This is a solution they can actually deploy. And the great thing about today is you've got everything from IBM, AWS, DigitalOcean. There's tons of places, OVH, you can spin up a system and manage on your own. And the more that you can take on, the cheaper the solution gets. If you need to rely on us, we can help manage pieces of that. But depending on your in-house resources, we can get incredibly competitive with the pricing.
All right. So we talked about we talked about the OmniNet stuff. We talked about SD-WAN. I'm now an expert. I don't even need you anymore, Rob. I'm kidding. I'm so kidding. So what is SASE?
Sure. SaaS acceleration at the edge. I don't remember the exact acronym because it's things people were doing. It's like cloud before, people called hosted, SASE is what Gartner is now pitching as the secure edge type of model. And that I think is supposed to come with some of the NDPI type of functionality so that you can see better visibility to what's consuming my bandwidth, what's causing me to redefine QoS and do things the manual way instead of relying on some more modern automation of that. It's trying to extend an enterprise model all the way to the edge where customers are now working from home, but they're still somehow under this managed umbrella that a common IT group is responsible for.
Okay. And I do remember when we spoke, gosh, I took so many notes. I'm even having trouble finding it. So you mentioned that SD-WAN isn't the thing that's actually doing the QoS.
Technically, even if an SD-WAN provider has a QoS function, it's a different function that's embedded on that device. And the thing that I've observed working with several big players now is their implementation of QoS does not necessarily give you what you're looking for. Sometimes it does, but not all the time. So it really depends on how QoS is implemented on those solutions. The one that we've preferred to work with now implements things like CODL that we've talked about in the past. We really didn't get a clear understanding of all the problems that have come up around QoS until we started working in the satellite world. And I've got background from 2009 to 2015, where I was pretty heads down in the satellite world. And you're talking about, you're not 50 or 100 millisecond type of latency, which your gamers are intimately familiar with. You're talking about 650 milliseconds minimum. And we're talking about, life before Starlink, but even that's half. Okay. But when you're talking to a craft 20,000 miles out in space, you've got to optimize that connection. You've got to help TCP function better in that world. And the problem on what most solutions have done with a terrestrial set of experience, DSL cable modem, all that, they've created buckets where let's queue things up. This is the standard QoS model that's broken, that is implemented better with these other solutions that we work with. When you have these buckets where you're putting TCP packets in it, it doesn't matter if you're tail dropping it or all these other complicated details we can get into how it's managed, you end up with buffer bloat. And that's something you can easily Google and check out. And there's all kinds of articles talking about what buffer bloat is. And while you don't see it as bad in the cable in the DSL world, it's still impacting how that box is performing. You don't have to do all that. So you strip some of that out and you use things like CODL, and you're helping TCP work the way it was supposed to originally work, just with some enhancements to make it work better, instead of this concept of filling up a bucket and then it all overflowing and your box crawling because it's now strapped with too much CPU and RAM usage.
And I remember that I feel like that was part of that demo that at the time My Digital Shield was showing. In fact, if you go to the OmniNet website and you look at the How It Works page,
right?
Let's see. I swore I just saw the same 6-year-old picture on one of these pages. Yeah, the OmniWAN page.
Right.
So the OmniWAN page, it shows your internet, and it looks like you got a bunch of cars trying to to drive through a campground,
Mhm.
and then your internet with OmniWAN, you got a bunch of super awesome cars driving on a 6-lane freeway.
Right.
So
That's a good
what they're
marketing perspective on getting the mentality through. But think of it like this: when you click send on an email, if it takes 1 second or 10 seconds to finish that upload or download,
Mhm.
do you really care? Is that in your foreground? Is that in the user's
It's not.
consciousness of whether it's fast or not? You don't really care. So what we've done in the past, and what providers like Ethica's Cloud Access product has done, is created a subset of rules where we describe applications now in a foreground, background, and kind of a midground way. VoIP, DHCP, all of these things that are critical. They need to be prioritized a certain way versus background services. And one of the problems, just to exacerbate the issue, or expand on the issue, if you took the traditional QoS approach with streaming media, Netflix or Hulu, you can see this in a satellite environment. So if anybody's out there testing, and we can show you tools to test with so you can really see this for yourself, and you make it think that you've got more bandwidth than you really do. Well, guess what they're going to do? You're not going to get a 480 stream or
you're going to get a 720 or
you're going to 720.
They're going to send you a higher quality stream if they think you have more bandwidth.
Exactly. So while it may look like you've got RAM, more bandwidth for a second or two or three, enough for a demo, it compounds the problem. So not only are you getting worse service as a user, you're consuming more bandwidth on the satellite provider side, and they're already struggling to try to maximize the bits they put through with the RF spectrum that they've got. Same thing with your wireless guys. They're trying to capitalize on, how do I put more bits and bytes through that RF spectrum? I'm close to getting my ham radio license so that I can speak more intelligibly in this arena, but I do have enough RF background to understand this. Guys like Panasonic, which we've consulted with before, they call it congestive collapse. It's buffer bloat. It's the same problem. So doing QoS differently makes a profound difference, to where you can saturate a connection and new applications can go through, and you don't see that latency go up when it happens. And that's one of the things that I love about, like, the Ethica product as a perfect example. If you have no visibility to how your latency floor changes when a user is using that connection, you're blind. You're troubleshooting blind. And the MSP customers that I've consulted with in the past, the ones that we're working with on these products, no one likes to have a customer come to them and say, this has happened, you're managing my network, and it's still happening. And all the MSP can do is call the ISP and rant about it. And it's impacting VoIP, it's impacting Office 365, all of these things that users depend on. So if they can't see it, they can't troubleshoot it. They don't know when to grab additional data. If we can monitor that stuff, we can even queue some automated actions in order to capture that. And we've done in the past. And this is why we love products that have a strong API, so that we can add value to what they've already got. They give us a baseline product, and we can implement this type of experience in it with our own portal to show you additional stuff. If we see a anomaly on your network, that's the point you want to be doing a detailed trace route, where you can see where in the network is the problem, so that you can tell your ISP, at this time of day, this happens. Whether it's an issue, whether it's a quality issue, you need to be able to give them that data, or they're going to go through the same process over and over again, and you're going to talk to 5 people before you even get to the guy that can troubleshoot your issue.
Gotcha. All right. I see a question.
Sure.
I see that Tara has asked, how does SD-WAN address the problem of QoS differently than older approaches?
Okay, perfect. So I'm assuming, and if this assumption is wrong, let me know. If you put QoS on your CPE device, whether it's pfSense, OpenSense, you're really only in control yourself of what you're sending out. And PFSense, OpenSense, they support Coddle at this point, so you can have better control over what your downstream utilization is. But you still have some limitations because things have already been sent down the pipe, your direction, and they're being managed at your front door. If there's a flood of zombies at your front door, can you really do as much at that point versus if you manage them coming up the street in the data center? So with these bookshelf solutions where there is a controller in the cloud, you're managing it before it ever leaves the data center, before it ever comes across the connections and down to your last mile. So if you can prevent it there, your QoS policy is infinitely more functional.
So now we're gonna try and take everything that you spoke about for the last 25 minutes or so, and we're gonna try and do you have kids?
Absolutely. I've got a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I stay pretty busy.
Okay. We're gonna pretend that you're explaining this to your kids, okay? So
Right.
because I just need to make sure I get it, Rob. Okay, we're gonna explain
Absolutely.
like you're 5, and I'm gonna start. I'm gonna say that what you're saying is that with SD-WAN, depending on what technologies you put out there in the data center before it even hits your internet connection,
Right.
you have the ability to kind of control what data comes to you and in what order it comes to you.
Right.
And because you're controlling it out there, that's making it so that way your network hardware here, like at your office or home or wherever, it doesn't have to work as hard or whatever, because the actual work is being done out there at the data center.
Correct. Yeah, the best analogy I could give, kind of alluded to it a second ago. My son plays a lot of Minecraft, and you get points for killing zombies and all that. And whether you like Walking Dead or Minecraft, everything's zombie oriented now. When you think about that as packets, right? They're just coming at you. You requested it, and there's a flood, right? Well, if you can, kind of control, it's not at my front door, which is me on this side of the last mile, but we've got a gate that goes all the way out here to a larger area that's fenced off, and we can control it that way now. Well, you're not taking a risk of them getting through in this critical area. You've already dealt with them upstream, and now you're controlling them, letting them in one by one, or at whatever pace that you want.
And that's not to say that you can just leave the door open.
Right.
It's just saying you don't need 9 locks on the door.
Well, this is true, but this is the reason that we partnered with Netify, and we love working with them for a lot of reasons. Because when you start talking about QoS, there are a lot of countries and companies that don't have any limitations of what they can allow or block. So let's just say, Facebook versus BitTorrent. Maybe you do want to allow Facebook. You definitely want to allow Office 365. But maybe you do want to allow social media because it's part of your business. But you don't want to allow BitTorrent. And you definitely don't want to waste your time trying to QoS BitTorrent. With DPI being integrated on these devices or upstream in the cloud, you can just block that stuff before it ever happens. And BitTorrent is traditionally been very hard to identify. When I worked at the cable company years ago, we used a system called Sandvine. And it was always a cat and mouse game of identifying that traffic to begin with. And then people started encrypting their connections, so it got even harder. And with Netify, you can identify at the application level, even if it's encrypted, because there's signatures to these applications. The way they operate, there are things that you can look at, and their list of signatures is huge. So you implement that at the data center, you're now QoSing, 50% of what you would have tried to before, and this unidentified traffic or whatever, you don't have to even allow it all. So you're not wasting any cycles on that stuff.
Okay. So for those of you listening or watching live, don't go anywhere. But what I'd like to do now, Rob, is I think now is a good time for us to wrap up the first part of this episode, or the first part of several episodes. Whatever. I'm still trying to figure this all out, guys. Okay. I'm sorry. But Rob, thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening on the podcast, we will be back tomorrow with the next part. And for those of you watching live, we're going to continue now. So, Rob, man, we talked about some stuff that made my brain hurt, not going to lie. And you were able to simplify it for me and basically explain that, SD-WAN allows you to control things at I'll call it the data center that's not your office. So it comes into that place, wherever the data center is, that does whatever you ask the network equipment to do, and then it sends it to my office or home over my internet connection or connections. Mm-hmm. And I believe you also said that SD-WAN originally, or is supposed to be, or whatever, designed so you can take 2 or more internet connections and bond them. So that way, if you've got me, I'm lucky. I've got a gigabit connection here where I'm at. So what you're saying is I could get 5 of these gigabit connections.
Yes.
Bond them all together using an SD-WAN, and now have 5 gigabit internet.
Essentially, the only thing I would caution on using the concept of 5 gigabit is just like Amazon services. If you do threshold testing, a lot of them can't exceed a gigabit per second. They just don't expect the consumers of that to be getting more than a gigabit per second of a stream anyway. So I know that we've done tests with cloud access product that are 3 gig, I think, but when you start getting into 5 gig, I would ask the question, what is it you're trying to do with 5 gig of throughput?
Don't tell me how to live my life, Rob. Just let me live the fantasy.
Hey, I'll just pick the right tool to make it happen. That's the difference. So,
all right. So, so I should not have a 5 gigabit connection. But what you're saying is, if I had 5 10 meg connections,
yes,
then I could have a 50 meg connection essentially by bonding all together.
500 meg, absolutely.
Then why not 5 gig connections?
The only reason I caution people on gig is that we've run into issues even just in the last month here, like I said, with Amazon, where someone had their data center services in the same data center as some partner they were connecting to their application. And there was a gigabit threshold between the hypervisors and the technology that Amazon uses in the data center. So even though it's 1 millisecond response times, they had a 1 gig bottleneck. So when we start exceeding that 1 gig bottleneck, I just start to make sure everybody understands, there's technically, you're just moving the bottleneck at that point. There's still restrictions. So,
well, I think the obvious answer is, what do I want a 5 gigabit Ethernet connection for? I mean, like you said earlier, we don't want to use BitTorrents. It's because news groups are better.
Hey, absolutely. And where I would go with this conversation is, like, let's just say in a closed lab environment, you had server, let's say it's an SMB server, something simple, port 445. You've got your SMB client on the same network. Let's even say it's a 10 gig network, just so that you've got,
it already.
Let's see what this thing can do. Even if the process and the hardware you've got, you beef that up and you max it out, how fast or how long does it take for that SMB traffic to consume 1 gigabit per second? I challenge anyone listening to this to, do that experiment. And what you'll see is there's a slow start kind of graph, and it's not just a 1 gig. It takes a second to get to that level of throughput.
Sure,
you might have it available, but now you're talking about limitations of TCP. And this is where Replify comes in. Time to first byte is a metric that on any web page, you can right click in Chrome and inspect element, and then you can refresh the page that you're on. And it doesn't matter if it's new sites are great. I'm not going to pick one for, staying out of, left, right leanings, pick a third party country, BBC.
iPhone or Android.
Doesn't matter, whichever one you prefer. But inspect element and look at that waterfall. You're going to see at least 100 to 200 different HTTP GET requests, and the time to first byte. You'll see this, and this would be a great demo someday just to show the problem, because I've been really surprised to learn how many MSPs really have never dove that deep into analyzing the tools they're working with. So something's slow, they have the option right there in Chrome to really see what part of it is slow. Some of them are using outdated DNS. It's just, you can see how long does it take for this one request out of that 200. How long does it take for the DNS response? How long does it take for time to first byte? How long does it take for delivering the actual payload? And when you really start to look at that stuff, you get a deeper understanding of what it is the real problem is that you're trying to solve. And with, a dentist type of setup where they've got this application, they got a couple of branch offices that are all connecting to it. They don't really have bad latency, but it was designed to work in a LAN environment, which is still sub, 10 milliseconds, not 50 and 100 milliseconds. When you start working in those types of environments, you really start to see the value of Replify, where they do TCP enhancements, like we started to talk about TCP BBR, or time to first byte enhancements, optimizing things at layer 3 and above, or layer 4 and above. Even getting HTTP specific protocol optimizations. So instead of having to wait for this back and forth three-way handshake, if you've ever done a Wireshark capture, you can see that ladder diagram. That would be another great tool to do, where we can actually see the back and forth before you can even transfer byte number 1. Let's say it's just a 1K payload. The time to send that is huge. That's the type of thing that WAN optimization addresses. So you can go from this curve to saturate that link significantly quicker.
All right, so I just shared my screen a moment ago. I'm gonna put it back up here in just a moment. So I'm not a Chrome user. I'm a Safari user.
Okay.
Because I don't know, because I like being that guy maybe.
Yeah.
So if I look at this website, that full disclosure, I designed this website. Okay. If I'm looking at this correctly, JavaScript and events is happening before the 60 millisecond mark, or the 70. I don't know which one is which, but so you just said that the newer websites are super not great.
Well, no, so to clarify, if it depends on your hosting provider. If they've enabled HTTP2, for instance, then you're doing some things at the server level, like TCP multiplexing, which is something we've been doing in WAN optimization for a while. And we do that for things that don't natively support it. So websites may not be the best application here to talk about that problem with, but just so that you can see the problem, this is the easiest way that everybody on this stream can just right click and see it. And you may not be able to see it that way with, like I said, the dentist application. If it's web-based, then of course you can. But most of like SAP or pick any ERP system, I've still not found one that is HTTP2 where it's trying to overcome some of these problems. And those are the types of applications where WAN optimization would just absolutely help. SMB shares across the internet or VPN. We can talk about why it gets worse over VPN. So it, makes it clearer how WAN optimization helps. But just your run-of-the-mill website, those really aren't the problems we're trying to address. Even though it does help, that's not our focus. This is just the easiest way to show you the problem.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes better sense, because I was about to yell at you for saying all new websites are slow, and mine isn't. Darn it.
No, actually, there's a great tool, and I don't remember the name of it right now, but there's a little Chrome plugin. I don't know if there's one for Safari, but you can enable HTTP2 and speedy indicator, and it'll show you if the website is HTTP2 compliant, so that you're getting that instead of serial ping 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 BB gun type of effect, it's a shotgun effect. And ask for this, and you get 6 concurrent HTTP streams multiplexed in the response. So instead of having to wait for that 15K thing before you go on to the next request, DOM load and page load time, that's kind of the thing to look at in the bottom of that inspect element section of your browser. We've seen that cut down to 25% of what it is. 9
Gotcha.
seconds to load a page down to 3 seconds. So we're not always talking about byte deduplication and benefits offloading bytes as much as we are also time. So, but if you've got HTTP2 on your website, that's great. We still help in that regards. We have HTTP2 support, so we're still doing some things there. But that's just the way to see the problem.
Okay. All right. So let's get back on the train here. The SD-WAN train. Choo choo. All right. So this all still hurts my brain, Rob, but I'm starting to get it. So you said that you work with some of these other vendors. You mentioned Ethica, and
Yes.
you mentioned, I'm going to say Replibit, but I know that's not right.
Replify.
Replify.
Replibit would have actually be very applicable, though. That's a good one.
All right. So so Replibit. Let's talk about Replibit for a second then. Because maybe we should talk about how can this apply in the real world. So Replibit is a backup tool. So we could switch that out for a Datto BDR or Veeam or any other backup software. And let's pretend we're backing up over the cloud.
Sure. That's a perfect use case.
All right. So walk me through this. What do we need and why? Because I want to make sure my backups are fast and never fail.
Right.
At the internet end, I should say.
We had a bank that we worked with in the past that had 10 meg over their MPLS connections, and their backup was still going at 8 something in the morning when people started to get in, which makes people a little nervous, that the network's slow, and the application they're connecting to is slow, sometimes not even available if it's being backed up. And an 8-hour backup job we've seen with Replify reduced to a couple of hours. So how does that work?
Really?
Absolutely. So there's several different technologies that Replify uses. For one, compression. How do we squeeze 50 meg of stuff into a 5 meg zip file? It's the same basic technology, just applied to the TCP stream. So if we compress that stuff down, we've got enough compute power now, even if it's running on a Windows server directly with the Replify client, not a box in the middle. You're using the resources you've got with this simple application that's installed right there to crunch that down before it ever goes across the wire.
All right. So is this application something that you're providing us, or one of your vendors, I should say?
So it depends on the use case. There are some use cases where we can use the stock Replify client, but because we're an aggregator, we can get
maybe better pricing than direct.
Yeah, exactly. We also provide a level of support. They're focused on the OEM market, and a lot of the MSPs I've worked with have a lot more questions. They want a little bit more access to guys that can do pieces for them. Like, to run a Replify environment, you've got to have some Linux expertise. And what my experience has been is most of the MSPs that the gross majority of SMBs rely on, they're Microsoft-centric guys. They're not the guys that are going to be able to troubleshoot Linux. They probably run some things, but they really don't want to manage those sometimes. So we do the heavy lifting there, for them. But there are also cases where Replify doesn't provide user authentication. So we've got a wrapper application that we've built that can go in front of that to give the ability to user registration and manage the Replify piece as a background service, which also helps with branding. It keeps Replify from having to branch their code, which leads into an OEM agreement, which is much more expensive. In order to deploy it, we can work with an MSP to manage that as a background service. So if you have an RMM tool like LabTech or
ConnectWise, Automate,
Kaspersky could be a big one. Or I'm sorry, not Kaspersky.
Kaseya,
thank you. The
one
that hasn't been hacked. Right. Any of those, if you do push button application deployment, we can get the Replify client pushed out that way. So you don't even have to talk to the users and let them know that you've deployed anything. They just notice that it's faster. So the policy configuration, all of that, that's why we're a value-added distributor. We can help you with all that setup without you having to have that expertise.
Now, when we say, hey, Rob, we need this wrapper, we need this, we need that, is this stuff that you're charging us for?
So most of our value-added features are baked in, if you will, where we use our margin to share with our partners. We're channel focused, but if we do have a customer that needs this directly, we will service them, but we will immediately start looking for an MSP in that region, because we want to bring MSPs up to par, to be able to manage this stuff themselves. Don't know if that answered the question there or not, but.
So you don't charge us for the extra stuff that you've written?
Well, it just depends. Like, let's say, for instance, you had a team of Linux guys, you had your own data center, you're going to get something closer to software only pricing, and we make our margin on that. If you need someone helping manage the server running in your cloud, we're going to charge you something for that, but it's just to cover our costs more than it is. We want you to scale. So our pricing is really focused on the per unit stuff. But
so it sounds like the pricing
to offer it as a service, we can do that too. But we prefer to help you grow it if you want to. But it really depends. There's a big range of MSPs out there. So, some of them are even lone wolves that they really don't need a lot of help. But at the same time, they just want to manage it. They don't want to brand it. Their brand is them, their time, and the ability to find the solutions. Some people want to be able to monetize this in a different way to compete with MPLS. So it's not unfortunately
it's not an easy yes or no
thing, but we go through probably a 15-minute call, a 30-minute call, and we can figure out pretty quick which model fits you best to get you, what you need.
Okay.
And that's something you're never going to find with most of the ISPs. They're selling it. It's a packaged product. It's a fixed price. And, you're looking at hundreds of dollars a month a lot of times for, something that you don't need half of.
So you mentioned MPLS. Let's talk about that for a moment. It has been a long time for me, my friend. So refresh my memory. Let me know if I'm wrong. MPLS is when you just want a connection from one site to another. And you don't need an internet connection. Well, it's going over the internet, but site A is like we'll call it the master or whatever you want to call it. And then site B, their internet connection, because it's MPLS, they can't see the whole internet. They can only see site A. And then if they want, they can set it so that they can get to the internet through site A's internet.
Essentially. So the private subnetting is offered to you by the ISP. So you have a point-to-point circuit, if you will, that they are managing. And what a lot of people don't realize that, I've gotten a lot of confusion on the fact that, my MPLS network is much more secure because it's not on the public internet. Well, that's
it is
mostly true if you think about just the fact that people can't, see that private subnet traffic except for your ISP. And what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of ISPs now are scanning that traffic because it's not actually encapsulated and secured. It's just a private label, and they can see it plain as day in their equipment. So
And when you say they can see it plain as day, walk me through that. So, like, they can see I'm playing Call of Duty and I just got the new high score, or they can just see that I'm connecting to callofduty.com over port X. They know port X is the port typically used for online multiplayer gaming, and that they can tell I'm connected to the game, but they couldn't tell me I
Right.
just won.
Yeah,
Because all they see are bits and bytes.
let's use VoIP as a specific example. It's
Okay. And
it's
they won't see my
non-encrypted
phone
by
call.
default. So I'm actually BroadSoft certified. So I've been through that. Worked with a company years ago. Built a provisioning system. Polycom 501s. That era, and that traffic between the phone and the data center where that's being hosted out of, it's not encrypted. Not the signaling is not encrypted. So the phone number information, the caller information, the signaling, that's not encrypted. Likewise, the payload is not encrypted. So if you're using G.711 or G.729 as the codec, which you're not necessarily choosing, the provider is providing it for you, even if you've done a slider to make it better for your bandwidth, that's not encrypted. So whoever is in the middle is doing very often analysis on that, even if they're just capturing the signaling data, port 5060, they can see traffic information. We used to do this all the time. Some of it's regulated that they have to. So there's some people that have a privacy concern about that issue, and there's some people that have just a personal issue with it, I guess. This is why you see kind of an uptick in VPN usage in general, where at least this ISP that I don't trust, or this country of origin that I don't trust, they can't see it because it's now encrypted. But what if you want to be in control of where the exit point is, like an MSP, where they have their own data center, or they have an agreement with OVH, so they can run whatever data center, they can run these services in whatever data center they want and be in control of where that data flows between point A and point B. That data is encrypted, so you can't see that. And on an SD-WAN product, that's great for shielding from your ISP if you have trust issues there. And I've talked to a lot of MSPs that do, for various reasons. You have a lot more confidence that traffic between your CPE and the data center in control of someone you trust is encrypted, just like a VPN. AES 256-bit encrypted, or whatever encryption level you want. That's normally a choice. But that's important to a lot of people. And that's something available in the Cloud Access product, the Replify product. Anything that's bookshelved, you're in control of where it comes out and if it's encrypted or not.
Okay. So I just want to ask a clarifying question. If they can, it's because the payload is unencrypted. Does that mean that hypothetically they can listen to our phone call?
I mean, no question. Pull up Wireshark one day. Like I've got a Ubiquiti, device at home. I've got a mirror port on one of my switches. There's a lot of different ways that you can get that without being directly on your own laptop. As long as you're in line on the network, most people know how to do a PCAP, PFSense, OpenSense, there's an option. You just go right in there and capture that and then analyze it later in Wireshark. I don't remember the tool, menu exactly off the top of my head, but you can do a ladder diagram to see what all calls did it see traverse the network, and then let me listen to the payload to the point where you can even say, I want to isolate audio in this direction. I want to isolate audio in this direction, or I want to play them both at the same time so I get both sides of the conversation. And this is actually something that you have to do sometimes for debugging. There's something in the network causing problems, with certain calls. Have you ever noticed, you press the buttons as a menu option on some calls and it's not receiving that input? The DTMF signaling isn't being picked up right on the other end. Well, who do you report that to? You can report it to the provider, but what are you going to report? Sometimes it's helpful to say this call at this time had this specific problem, and just having the tools to be able to see that is valuable. But yeah, you can absolutely listen to that if you're in line.
All right. So, and inappropriate question. DTMF, I mean, I know what DTF stands for, so I can only assume that DTMF is down to mother. It can't be right.
Dial tone multi-frequency, I think, I think is what it stood for. Essentially what it is it's a simulation, if you will, or an emulation of the old school cross section. Like, everybody's familiar with kind of your tic-tac-toe dial pad. Well, there's a frequency for the vertical lines and the horizontal lines, and whatever combination of frequency this is, 2 has a unique DTMF code. This one has one. This one has one. So all of that signaling that you see in the SIP protocol, and it's
wait. Hold on a second. So really, because I've always known that, like, all the numbers sound a little different, and I've always known that they have 2 tones happening.
Right.
But you're telling me that 1, 4, and 7 on the phone, since they're all in a vertical row, one of the tones on all of those is all the same.
Well, the tone that we hear is a concatenation or a combination of both tones, the cross section, if you will. But I'm
saying just one of the 2.
Mm-hmm.
One of the 2 tones is the same on that vertical line.
Well, one of the 2 frequencies that make up this single tone.
Okay. And then each of the horizontal lines on the dial pad, each of those has a specific frequency.
Essentially. The old school analog stuff did, but this is all emulated now. And give you an example, something we helped a customer isolate. One was using I don't remember who the SIP provider was, but they were doing in-band DTMF, which is basically where in that audio stream you would hear it. Okay. Just like me and you talking, beep, it would be part of the audio stream. That's in-band DTMF. And what they were experiencing was every time this person would, talk or get excited, they would hear a beep. And the reality is they were actually vocally talking at the same frequency of that tone, and you would hear the system thought it was a beep. So you'd hear that. You don't see that as much anymore, but that's because people have gone to out-of-band DTMF, where when you press that button on a digital device, if they are configured to use out-of-band DTMF, you don't hear it in the audio stream. You see it in the SIP signaling. So, but I think the issue, because this has been a year ago now, it was, we were able to see with the Wireshark capture, which was easier to get to because of the SD-WAN product we were using. We could see that DTMF code and report it. Just made it easier to describe the problem, the time we were having the problem, and it did get fixed.
All right, so I'm going to ask some like ridiculous questions, but that's because I still don't understand really the capabilities of this stuff. Okay, so I understand what SD-WAN can do between me and the data center that the other router, network equipment, whatever is at. But if for the MSPs, let's talk about this on the legal side for a minute. Mm-hmm. For the MSPs that have that paranoid level of security desire, right?
Sure.
So they don't want the ISP or the government or whatever person they think is going to look at the stuff, may actually be looking at the stuff. I have no idea. They don't want them to see the payload anywhere along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that they need SD-WAN going from each client to wherever those backups are being located?
So what I would say there is,
or once
if your phone number is registered in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and your provider is servicing that with their data center also located in the U.S., at some point, this is under CALEA, C-A-L-E-A. There's regulation so that we have tools for authorities to look into issues, whether it's a live, threat type of issue or reactive or a recording that they react to later, for archival purposes. Those features, those are going to be available at the provider. If they're using BroadSoft, if they're using Metaswitch, whatever they're doing to offer that endpoint in the data center, they're under regulations. That's going to be there, but you at least want it to be used if they have a warrant, or if they have, you don't want someone in the middle, someone in your neighborhood that may be, spoofing, things that can intercept traffic, those threats, someone that's going through your private data center, if that's a concern for you, those are the places that you can secure. Once it comes out of, let's say you do have a cloud access product in the cloud and it's encrypted end to end. When you come out of that on the other end of the data center, you still got to go through wherever that data center is to the cloud application. So
at that point, it becomes unencrypted.
It's whatever it is. If it was encrypted, fine. If it's not encrypted, like we're talking about here, right between there and there. That's why there's kind of a nuance, and people using a VPN, to these like NordVPN, ExpressVPN.
Yeah,
they have good products. I'm not bashing them, but the reality is, if it's a matter of trust, you're just moving the point of who you're trusting to wherever that data center is located, and you don't know where that data center is located. So wherever it comes out to your cloud application, that's a potential risk. The thing about an MSP is, if you can be in control, at least, like let's say you're hosting in your own data center, you've got a half rack of gear, and you're hosting that dentist application. Or maybe you're hosting their PBX, free PBX or something. I've seen guys do that. And then they're putting their phones on site. You can encrypt it between point A and point B, to where at least that between their phones and your node in the data center, it's completely secure end to end, no prying eyes in the middle. Kind of like a VPN, but VPNs cause other problems. We can talk about that, if you want. But you're at least in control of end to end, that not being visible and it being reliable. And that's something, again, VPNs don't traditionally do either, is bonding a connection. So bonding and encryption is a unique thing to SD-WAN.
Okay. I feel like this is a good place to wrap up part 2.
Okay.
I have one question I want to get to.
Okay.
Tara asked another. What about companies that went to work from home policies? Is SD-WAN any different than MPLS for data privacy?
Right. Yeah.
Is it an MPLS backbone still fine?
So typically, you're not going to see a company invest in an MPLS circuit all the way to the home.
No.
They're typically going to do that branch to branch or branch to headquarters. So you now have this conundrum of, how do we get the same quality, if you will, even though you can use SD-WAN to replace MPLS at that level too? How do you extend that to the home so that what they're accessing in that MPLS cloud is secured even over that last mile? And that's something most people think the solution for is a standard VPN. They might set up OpenVPN or Cisco VPN. And the problem there is you have this slinky effect where the TCP traffic going across that VPN, if there's a hiccup on the internet, it takes a second for everything to come back up.
Mm-hmm.
And that problem's exacerbated with VPNs, because that VPN has to be up before tunnel traffic can flow through it. And with Replify, for instance, as let's say a VPN alternative, it's encrypted between that Replify client on your machine and wherever that node sits in the data center. So similar to a VPN, it's encrypted end to end. And your application that traverses that is not having to deal with those slinky effects if there's a network hiccup. Session resume. Have you ever been doing a transfer? Mm-hmm. You had a network hiccup and it didn't just pick up where it left off. You had to click restart. And,
That's got to be the most frustrating thing.
Absolutely. SMB shares, just to make it simple there, you just got to start over. With Replify, it picks up where it left off because it's looking at things at the byte level. So it can see I've already done up to here, and it can pick right back up to the user. They see that they've transferred the whole file again, but if they've already transferred half of it, you're just seeing a little bitty hash go across the wire. So these are tools to extend that MPLS network to a home user or even a traveling user. Like Replify, it doesn't have to be a box set up at home. This could be something you use while you travel. We can elaborate on that if you're ready for a break there.
Yeah, I think now's a good time to wrap up part 2. For those of you listening on the podcast, we'll be back tomorrow with the next part of the episode. Take care. And for those of you live, we're going to start part 3 now. All right. So we talked about a lot of things, man. So I kind of want to go in 2 different directions. One, I want to talk about, I know we're talking about SD-WAN, but I want to talk about VPN for a little bit.
Sure.
And so how do I want to, which direction do I need to take this? So first I want to talk about the nefarious person, the evil hacker guy. You've watched the movies. They got the evil hacker guy, and then they show the picture of the map, and then they got the lines going from all these different cities all over the world, and that's him VPN tunneling in all these different places, and nobody can figure out where he is.
Right.
Can I do that? Is that how hacking works?
Well, to be honest with you, yes. People set up VPNs and they think they're getting, similar type of functionalities they see in the movies because, now things show that I'm in Canada and I can watch things that are only available in Canada. While there's some similarities, the reason some of these technologies are grossly different is their proxy services. People think about, Squid and some of the object-oriented proxies of the past, but these are TCP proxies. So the reason that's so important to recognize is while it accomplishes some of the same things, it's encrypted between nodes, OpenVPN client and OpenVPN server, or, ShadowSock's proxy and a ShadowSock's, proxy. It's encrypted in between. The difference is you're splicing the TCP connection instead of encapsulating the TCP connection. The reason that is so important for someone that's trying to maintain their productivity, get faster throughput, utilize this WAN optimization technology is imagine before you could take your Ferrari out onto the road, you've got to pull it up into the back of a semi and let the semi deliver it and then get out and race. This is like, a warp speed tunnel, if you will, where the Ferrari just stays at full speed ahead. It doesn't have to get into a truck that takes a lot longer to start up and move. It's just moving from moment to moment, kind of like a baton handoff, if you will. So you see one TCP connection all the way through. If you're not using any technology, if you're encapsulating that with a VPN, you see the VPN connection in the middle. It's encapsulated. It's in the tunnel. And you see the MTU size has to change, or else you get these split packets. I don't know if have you ever looked at the effects of MTU sizes on your network?
Not even a little.
So this is an awesome test to do, I think, for everybody. Every MSP needs to know this, especially as a lot of ISPs are pushing, some services, out that you're not aware of. Just do a ping, from your command prompt. There's a switch. If you just type in ping, you can see the level of switches, list of switches that you can implement. Specify the MTU as 1500. Go out to Google's DNS servers or something you're familiar with, and set the do not fragment flag. It's typically like a -D switch. And you'll see that you get a response back from your own network saying, I can't. At 1500, I've got to break that packet into two in order for it to get out to where it needs to go. So that means I'm going to have two packets to get your one packet where it needs to go. The problem is you end up with a pretty full packet and a little bitty not so full packet. If you were to be able to adjust that,
1492 is the sweet spot or something.
1472 is typically on cable modem, DSL, and those. If you set that do not fragment and your MTU size, I think it was -L allows you to specify that. 1473, I can't without fragmenting. 1472, you'll start pinging all day long. And without knowing that, a VPN connection is a perfect example. They're already encapsulating it, which means they need a little bit of that space for overhead too in their own messaging. Well, the applications behind it, typically MSPs don't adjust. They just throw the VPN in there and it goes. Well, if you know that VPN is using up part of the link, you can't maximize that throughput. You're taking twice the number of network packets to get the whole thing across. So instead of one dump truck, you're having to send a dump truck that's 90% full and another one that's 5% full, twice the time. So a lot of people are chasing latency issues when they implement VPNs that they don't even realize. They're not bandwidth issues at all. They're megabits per second, but it's the time that's incrementing, not the bandwidth that's lowering.
Wow. Okay.
Does that help? Because that's an easy test to do and see.
That does. That really helps, actually. I now want to play with that on my home internet connection because gigabit. I'm only getting gigabit. I feel like it could be faster.
Hey, my question would be, in a gigabit environment, the most common things that I've seen need some of this technology in that environment is, not really even the SD-WAN. If they have a resilience issue where, there's interruptions at some point, we've got a provider here in town, MetroNet, and there were times where, especially when they first got started, they would have some congestion issues. So if you used a tool like MyTraceRoute, where it's kind of like your traditional trace route, but it's doing ICMP tests every hop, along the way, you could see where at some point in their network they got congested. So their 1 millisecond, 2 millisecond type of response times went up to 150, 200, 300. It's like that's crazy in a fiber environment. And everybody deals with this every now and then. You'll see an outage, with somebody, things will get slow, but nobody really knows how slow it is. You turn something like that up where you can see that. And that's the type of thing that it blips and happens all the time, and people just don't know it, but they feel it. But they move on so quickly that, that's not enough to deal with right now. But an SD-WAN solution can overcome that. How long does it take to use that connection when you have a packet drop? TCP slow start, it's going to drop it and try to pick back up. And if you've got that happening at little frequencies, your transfer pattern is going to look like a sawtooth kind of transfer instead of a nice plateau, uninteresting graph. The uninteresting graphs are sometimes the best performing ones because it's constant. You're getting that full throughput.
Yeah.
I did
Is
this.
the MTU something that I set at the router, at the desktop, both?
It typically can be anywhere you have a congestion point, but if there is a change in topology, like let's just say in a traditional hub and spoke VPN environment, let's say you weren't using us at all for SD-WAN or WAN optimization, and you just wanted to improve your customer's experience, and you've got IPsec tunnels between everything. At that device that's terminating the tunnel, that's where you need to do this test, and that's where you need to change your MTU. Now, we automate those things for you so that you don't have to think about it. We detect some things to know, hey, we need to change the MTU because it's actually better to have that MTU set lower, like 1400, where you're maybe not even filling up every packet, than to have twice the number of packets or 3 times the number of packets that aren't full or utilized. So, but just in your own, I mean, just a freebie there, for your IPsec type of customers, that's the point you want to change the MTU. So when there's a topology change or an encapsulation change,
Okay.
And I really want to emphasize, I love the fact that we're diving into the problems, but this is really, I don't want it to scare people because of how deep we're diving into the problems. The great thing about SD-WAN solutions is it takes this complexity away. So if you're having these types of problems, you don't know where to start, whether it's MTU automation or it's the tunnel automation, it's time that we're saving the MSPs by automating this. So you don't even have to think about it. You put it in and it's managed. It's simplified.
So let's do this, because I agree that we're diving in deep, and I'm honestly just having a lot of fun right now. I'm asking you ridiculous questions. We're just having a good conversation. So let's do this. I'm going to share my screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a terminal window.
Okay.
All right. If you suspected that I had some kind of network issues, what can I do in a Mac OS terminal?
Okay. So you've got ping and traceroute available to you, and as simple as those tools are, those are just the de facto things to test with that's already available to you. So, ping out to something is on the other side of your last mile, 8.8.8.8, Google DNS servers. So right here, it's a nice consistent floor, 30 to 40 milliseconds. You can kill that. If we were testing QoS, or we were testing, how efficient is my SD-WAN solution or my QoS policy, WAN optimization, this would be, something you could look at to see. Go ahead and do a trace route as well. Just trace route to 8.8.8.8. So it takes a second for a trace route to complete, but it's doing that same basic test to every hop along the way. A tool that a lot of people would benefit greatly from is my trace route. It's just MTR. And if you're a Mac user, you can use Brew to install it. You can download it from a couple different places for your Windows machine. But it'll essentially combine what you're doing with traceroute and a ping test over and over again, where you see a nice little table of the latency to each hop in the network. And it'll also show you the difference in latency between packets. So jitter is something you hear about in the VoIP world. It's better to have 150 millisecond constant connection than to have 50 milliseconds 1 second and have 120 milliseconds the next. That jitter, the difference between those two back and forth, makes VoIP traffic have that slinky effect. And you can hear that, you can detect that. Jitter is an issue in the VoIP world. An SD-WAN solution can standardize that. We can see that difference in your two connections, and you either prefer one that isn't as bad, or use one over the other, or use a set of connections over another one and just have one for failover, all based on that information that we're constantly looking at on the packets.
Now, gosh, it's been years, and I don't even think this company does what it used to at this point, because there is, How frustrating. How sad. I just don't remember some of these tools. Like I've forgotten more tools and
Sure.
crap that some MSPs have ever even learned because I'm that guy. I got to play with every flipping thing out in the world, right?
Sure.
So I remember there was this tool for a little while, and it doesn't even do the same thing anymore. But let's see here. I found it. Firebind.
Okay.
I bet they don't do it anymore.
Yeah, there's a couple that have been out there like Ping Plotter. There's a few that I've seen ISPs use, but the problem is they're typically only turning them on in a reactive mode where customers reported an issue, they turn it on and they try to detect what's going on. The great thing about SD-WAN product, let's just talk specifically about cloud access for a second. This stuff is all happening in the background and it's graphed, so you can see over time. If you got a call about a problem that happened 30 minutes ago, a couple hours ago, you can go back and just look at it. So you get some benefit of automating that. You don't have to know these tools. Some people still use these tools, but that data is just captured. You can be alerted on a link going down so that you know about it before your customer does. As an MSP trying to offer managed services, you really need to be able to feel confident that you know about something before the customer does.
So I remember using this for a little while, Rob. This is their legacy product. I don't even think they will sell it to you anymore. This
Right.
is Firebind Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And what it would do is it would sit and run on one of the workstations or server if you want to get crazy. And basically every 5 minutes, it would test and collect all of this data like jitter, latency,
Right.
ping, everything. So that way you can look and see if you've got a crappy internet connection or not. And it was really awesome for helping with testing and whatnot. So what would you use if you wanted this pretty graph
Mm-hmm.
at a customer site, but you're remote?
Yeah. So, coming out of the carrier world, I've used a lot of SNMP based tools where you got to set a bunch of stuff up to monitor that router. You're collecting it and feeding into some system, and that's kind of the way we used to do things in the past. Those tools are implemented already in things like cloud access. So, if you're already seeing, in order to provide this value of resilient uptime, customers swiping a credit card, you don't want that to ever be down, lose a sale.
Mm-hmm.
So in the meantime, while that is being provided, if there ever is a problem that you still need to look at and fix, if one network connection goes down, you still need to fix it. Having all of that stuff that you used to have to spend a lot of time to set up being embedded in the tool already, that's a lot of value. Automating network monitoring, we're already looking at all the packets. We can see that stuff. Just put it on the graph and you don't have to set it up. It's already there. This might be one reason to go into a demo at some point on that product where you can see that happening, because that what you just showed, tracking latency, tracking packet loss, would there have been a disruption if you didn't have an SD-WAN solution? That helps the MSP show value that, no one ever thinks about the value when it's quiet. It's always, when things are broke. So it's helpful to be able to go in and say, hey, because of this solution we put in for you, in the last month, you've had 3 times that would have been completely down, maybe even for the day, or just interrupted. You can quantify that and show it very clearly with visual tools.
Okay, that's cool.
So I don't think you need a tool like that as much as you used to.
Okay. Now, when I pulled up the terminal, my thought was you were going to tell me some like magical, here's how you find your MTU.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that right now. Go ahead.
All right. Let me pull that back up. So many windows to choose from. All right. So back into terminal. So this is the exact same terminal. I'll just clear here. So if I wanted to find my MTU.
Right. You said you're on a Mac, right?
This is my Mac.
Right.
I know I could do like a ping. How many pings do I need? Like 2,000?
Yeah, I mean, just do like a -C with 1,000.
And then I know -D will tell it not to fragment.
Right. And let's see for the size.
And then -S is the size.
Right.
So we want to do 1472, you said. Well, no, let's do 1,500. Let's
do 1,500 because, that's the thing to recognize. Why are we even talking about this? The whole point is a lot of people have routers that they commercially bought at Best Buy or Ubiquity, and that MTU is often set as 1,500, which is the default for Ethernet, but the topology changes to cable modem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not accounted for. So at 1,500, it's having to split that, and you're not able to maximize your throughput, whether you use SD-WAN or not.
I don't think I need 1,000. I think all I need is 1. So when I look at this at 1,500, message too long. 1,490, message too long.
Right.
1,480.
Try 1,400.
Message too long. Well, we know 1,400 works.
So for 1470, 1480. Try both of those.
I know 1472 works.
1472 and 1473 is typically where I find the line.
73 is a no.
Right. Yep.
So
that means that if you have something, if you put Wireshark on your laptop right now, or let's say you had a router that you could do a capture there. If you do a capture and you see those packets, you're going to see, they're full coming in, and then you've got more coming out because it's got to split them up. It's got to, twice the number of packets. And people don't realize the impact of that, but you're sometimes talking about, twice the latency gain at an application layer to get that back and forth before you can get the next packet.
I can also tell you that my Mac hardware, the Wi-Fi adapter itself, the default is 1,500.
Okay.
So I'm going to manually set that to 1472, and everything's magically more amazing.
I would typically try to set it, the closest to the topology change as you can. It's okay, to do it, closer to you if you know that within a couple hops you're going to have a topology change. But this is the great thing about SD-WAN. We can manage that in an automated way, because as simple as this test is, that everybody can do to improve their existing connection right now. You don't need to buy anything from anybody. You can do that test right now, change that on your router, and you will immediately see better throughput, no question. In an enterprise environment, or if they change connections on you, a lot of times the customer's not buying circuits from you. They're going out and buying something because they got a deal, sales guy approached them, and they call you when there's problems. If it's your box, a CPE, device running, and they plug that up there, guess what? It's automatically detected.
Man. So then what I think I'm hearing you say is my Wi-Fi adapter on my Mac can be at 1,500.
Yeah, if you want it to be.
Because going from my Mac to my router would still be a 1,500 MTU, or it's just so fast between the two that it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, let's just talk about for a second. Let's forget cloud or internet connections at all. Let's just say you've got a switch at home and you've got two things connected, Ethernet to Ethernet. From there to there, you want all that to be 1,500. So that
why?
Because that is the max that Ethernet frames can handle, unless you're doing jumbo frame, which a lot of people have seen as a checkbox but never had to use it. Jumbo frames are, I think, like 9,000 or something inside your network. So if you do big data, you're talking about, multimedia producing shops where they're in a 10 gig network. You don't want to be restricted to these characteristics of TCP in that environment. So jumbo frames are one of the things that you could do. And this is, again, whether you use SD-WAN or not, whether you're combining connections, these are problems inside the LAN. So you can do that. So that's why I say it's always better to put it as close to the topology change as possible. And the great thing about an SD-WAN product is, you're putting it right there behind the internet connection. So that's pretty much within one hop of where it needs to happen. And it doesn't impact your firewall or LAN or anything inside. And you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. Now let's take a look at some comments here. Now I'm going way back, guys. All right. So we were talking about VPN for a while, and I started talking about the evil hacker man, right? So let's think about, it doesn't have to be an evil hacker man. It could just be a law office or a HIPAA compliant type of place that wants to be certain of privacy. So we know that they can have privacy that goes from their internet node from their office all the way, however many hops it takes, to wherever that SD-WAN provider's data center is. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay.
Your data center is up to you. What I would recommend is, if you've got customers in Eastern United States, you pick a data center that's closer to there. But the great thing about the internet is, when you get to the data center level, you're now talking about major connections between all of them, where you're sub 10 millisecond connectivity between all of them anyway. You just don't want to have a case where you put something all the way out in California that's the exit node for somebody that's trying to work out of Kentucky.
Right. So let me rephrase. I guess when I think of this, I'm still on the OmniWet mindset of, I don't know where that data center is. It's wherever OmniNet is, maybe Texas, for all I know.
Right.
So when you sell us our custom SD-WAN as an MSP, we put it in a data center of our choosing. That data center doesn't have to be a physical data center near us. We could use an Amazon or a Microsoft Azure, right?
OVH is a very popular one, just because it's super easy to work with. And you're in control of
DigitalOcean or one of those.
Yeah, DigitalOcean, that's fine.
Okay. So it doesn't even need to be a big fancy like Microsoft server on Azure. It can just be a Linux box on some kind of DigitalOcean droplet,
correct,
or OVH. Okay, so we figured that part out. So when my client transmits their data, whatever this data is, it's going from their office, we'll call it, to OVH, and then it disperses out to where it needs to go.
Correct.
Similarly, if I purchased NordVPN, it's being encrypted through a special VPN packet or tunnel or whatever. And it's going from my office or home to wherever the NordVPN tunnel data center is, probably some OVH somewhere else, and then out to the internet somewhere, right?
Right.
So both of them work similarly. The difference is SD-WAN gives us the ability to really customize the technology that's happening at that data center server, whereas a VPN, it's you're just paying for whatever they give you.
Yeah, I mean, your packets at some point are going to route through a data center anyway. Let's say Lexington, Kentucky. I used to work for the cable company. You're going to go through the same path to get to the internet, whether you're accessing Office 365 with a plain internet connection, or if you're using it across an SD-WAN connection. It just might be a different data center along the way to the data center that Office 365 is at.
Right. But the main difference is one is, I'm going to call it encrypted, and the other one's not, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the same would apply for if we were using a VPN instead of SD-WAN. One is encrypted and one's not, right?
Essentially, yeah.
That's the theory we're going with when we use these tools.
Well, like I said, effectively, a VPN and some of these tools look the same in the sense that I see a different IP, or this site, they tell you what IP they see you coming from. That's going to change with an SD-WAN product or a VPN. The difference is, are you managing this VPN? Do you know where it's coming out of? NordVPN, you can select which data center you want to come out of, but that's about, I think, the max level of control you've got. In an enterprise environment, especially, you probably wouldn't want to use that. This is more, I think, a residential, user type of context. So,
and let's make up a VPN. Okay, we'll call it Steve VPN. The slogan: "You can trust us, I swear." So when you use Steve VPN, it has a nice ring to it. Steve VPN.
Yeah, bot, man.
Rolls off the tongue. All right. So when you use this service, really all you can control is maybe what point you're connecting to, where it comes out of, whatever, right? So like you said earlier, you're shifting the trust, you're shifting the responsibility, whatever you want to look at. So do you trust Spectrum Cable to read it at your house? Or do you trust Spectrum Cable to be reading it at the other end on that data center that they're also using Spectrum when it comes out of
But if your VPN server is in OVH, all they see is an encrypted connection across their network. They can't see the data inside. They can't analyze your traffic surfing patterns.
Sure, but then it's got to come out of the VPN, right?
Well, and yes. So let's say you're hosted at OVH. How many hops are there between OVH and whatever it is you're trying to get to? There's still risk, so to speak, within that range. But if you do a trace route, you'll see that instead of your residential or business traditional 15 hops to get there, you're significantly less going data center to data center. And if you want to minimize that even further, this is where an enterprise would get like a private Azure instance to put whatever software they're going to put on it, whether it's a SD-WAN or WAN optimization. They want it hosted as close to their application as possible, so that there's a kitty cat. We've got two, so I don't have them here at the office, but
home office.
Absolutely, I'm glad to be back in the office. Somewhat, but and that's a good context too for talking about WAN optimization. Most people don't have MPLS to the home. Most people don't have fiber to the home. It's great if you have it, but it's amazing how many people I've seen trying to do a family of two kids and two adults trying to do Zoom for school, Zoom for work, YouTube during breaks, and the home traffic has grown exponentially over a residential cable modem DSL connection. It makes it hard. So enterprises that are trying to get better access to their applications, it's a great use case for Replify. If you've got something that is critical, you can't have any downtime, but you can afford, a cable modem and a DSL connection, you can use the Ethica product for small office, home office stuff.
So let's talk about some of these comments, and then I want to talk to you about just some like kind of basic, what are we looking at price wise to do some of these things?
Okay.
I'm talking ballparks. Obviously, everything's going to be a little different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's one that I think this was what I was trying to get out of you. So Yates Networks, first, I'm both privacy and security conscious, and that's going to be my new mission statement. That said, I would far rather ExpressVPN or private internet access to my data than Spectrum. So basically, they're saying they trust the VPN provider to manage the connection and look at the data and whatever else. They trust them more than they trust Spectrum.
Sure.
Is that? And I'm not asking, are they stupid? Okay. I'm just asking, with your experience with everything that you've done with networks and everything else, is that a good idea?
I would absolutely say yes. If they have that level of concern, one of the things to look at that really helps see why it's a concern, even with encrypted traffic, you go to HTTPS, whatever.com. There's a field called the SNI field where you can see, what it is that you're going to. That's in the middle. You can see it even if it's encrypted. There are other things that you could deduce it from, like maybe who owns the subnet and stuff like that. But that's one of the mechanisms that your ISP, using systems like Sandvine, can see what you're going to. They can throttle access to it. As a WISP, you've got the ability to do things like that under the net neutrality laws as it stands, more than someone like Spectrum can, because they're terrestrial. But you are absolutely making the right decision. I want to make sure that your audience is differentiating what I'm saying, though. ExpressVPN isn't something that you would see a small to medium business who's swiping credit cards use, but they need that same thing, and they need it managed pretty cost effectively. So that's where your SD-WAN.
He's talking more about like maybe the work from home people.
Yeah, the work from home people. I mean, it's not a bad idea. But the question I would ask is, have you ever had application performance issues? And if so, let's say you had a company with 10 or 15 remote workers that were all now working from home, and they have to access whatever they're accessing over a VPN, regulated environment, not ExpressVPN, but something that is in their data center. So your MSP or your IT guy is hosting that in your data center, and you've got all of these clients working from home, Windows machines that you manage, just to keep it simple. In that context, you can keep the VPN and layer Replify in that solution, where you have the Replify node there in the same data center as your VPN, and you now also have the Replify client on all of those. Let's say Cisco VPN or something that's more enterprise focused. Now, when there are drops in the VPN or problems, you're going to get more throughput, better consistency. We can quantify it with certain applications, but like SMB traffic, if you're trying to browse an SMB share from home over VPN, it's clunky. It takes more time. People can feel the difference working from home than in the office, even if they are on a gigabit connection. So if you're working over VPN in that environment and you put Replify in it, you're going to see it incredibly snappy. You're going to see the throughput better. And if you work on files where you're constantly making updates to files and your team members are downloading that and you're collaborating back and forth, you may only be changing 10% of the file. So let's talk about the way deduplication works. When it's looking at the byte level, it sees a common chunk. It indexes that, and it's in a way that's not identifiable, so you don't have to worry about HIPAA regulations or anything like that. You're only sending, let's say, a 64K hash for every 4K chunk of data. A 64 byte hash for every 4K chunk of data. Think about the significance there. Just to see this, we do have a demo on a device that we had done a couple years ago, Proxabyte, But it was hard for people to understand, WAN optimization. So it was hard to, if it's hard to get MSPs to understand it, it's hard to, get businesses to understand it. So you can see it really easy where you have a speedtest.net test going. You got 10 megabit per second. You put Replify in it, and it goes up to 100 megabit per second. And people are like, how can you do that? As we see common chunks of data go across the wire and index it that fast, what actually goes across the wire is just an index. Think about, just to give like a really simple analogy here. Let's say that Library of Alexandria on the other side of the earth was still operating. They had these big ancient books, and you wanted that big ancient book. The time it would take to send that over, to get your copy of it, it would take a while. Well, if you knew the Dewey Decimal number and you knew it, and you also had another sister library here in the States or, right next door, you could just go get that book because you knew exactly what it was based on the Dewey Decimal number. Similar concept. You build up a library of these chunks of data, and you would be surprised how much of the internet is repetitive. How many websites all use Bootstrap to start or use WordPress? 90% of the framework's the same. Google Analytics, there's one piece of it that's different, that big JavaScript payload. There's a lot of what we do that's repetitive that we don't even think about. And that's where Replify really helps. You'll see every bit between you and the client and the server and the application. You'll see that in a packet capture still go across, but Replify manages, that as one of its features. Compressing the data, deduplicating the data, and optimizing TCP and these other things to make it incredibly fast. So speedtest.net test 10 meg to 100 meg. It just blows your mind how it can help when you're working remotely. I think, is that a question that popped up?
So here's another one, and it's not really a question as much as it's just Tara said the idea is our clients still have an obligation to keep medical, financial, personal identity, all of this stuff. All of it needs to stay private.
Right.
So we have to implement solutions that protect that data from whoever. And what Tara is hearing is that the solution doesn't have to be slow.
Right.
And that's what they're here to learn about. Speed is great, but we can't compromise safety. And and I agree. It sounds like what you're offering us is both.
Absolutely.
If we use SD-WAN over a VPN.
Yeah. Again, you're getting more security because you're in control of point A to point B. You don't have to rely on anybody else that you may or may not trust. They get a compromised key or whatever. It's you don't have that issue. And with Replify, keeping a library of the data, it's stored in a way that can't be reassembled by human beings. So you're not talking about personally identifying information being even captured or HIPAA compliance being violated. It's inline.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
don't worry about it. I'll read it out. You could just keep talking and don't lose your train of thought. I don't mean to confuse you.
No, this is actually great. These are great questions. One of the prime audiences we want to address are the MSPs with a data center, or even just OVH, or they understand how to use those tools, and they're in control of the data center.
Sounds cool.
I mean, being able to use your own resources if you already have a data center, now you've got a way to monetize those better. If you don't, you can start making margin on these tools instead of, let's say you went to your carrier, to say, hey, I need an SD-WAN solution, just to make sure we're in, alignment here. You're talking about $500, $600 a month sometimes for those,
just for them to check a box.
Yeah, just for exactly. So, if you're talking about MPLS circuits, you may not even be able to get MPLS circuit to where you're at. So you may have build out costs, So, being able to start with something that has, depending on your level of expertise, no essential capital to start up, and having per site license, let's say, under $100 a month, being able to charge per meg yourself if you want to charge in a metered way, where the MSP is now capturing that, and they're using the same caliber software as the big telecoms, you're more in control. Give you another example where this has been valuable. A lot of ISPs want to book revenue. So, like a lot of companies, and they have 12-month contracts, especially if you get that new fiber circuit, right? So you get IPs and subnets, you grant access to certain applications, and it's using the IPs that's in the ISP's control. You're not in control of that. If you're an SD-WAN solution, you can get a new provider set up, ready to go, so that the day the other one expires, you don't have to change anything that day. So when you start talking about MSPs now juggling and project managing the implementation of an internet circuit and all of the ramifications, whether it's access lists or, the new VPN endpoint has to change, so they have to change that in their clients. You're not using that anymore. You're using something that's in your control. So you can set it up during the day. You don't have to do it during the maintenance window. You don't have to wake up, heart palpitating to, that alert that you've heard, too many times you need PTSD therapy for, you can do it during the day. You can change that over, with one flip of a switch, or just let it die off whenever they stop billing for it, and nothing changes from the customer's perspective.
So, Rob, we're going to have to wrap up here in a few minutes, like actually wrap up, not do one of those pretend wrap ups. So I want to try and get through, I'm going to call it the lightning round. Okay. So Yates Networks said, this is a very unique and sorely needed product for medium and larger MSPs. I agree with that, but can't it also be used by small MSPs?
Absolutely. That's most of the providers that we've seen that offer this, $15,000, $20,000 if you want to own the software, sometimes 50 to 60. It makes it inaccessible. A small to medium MSP, they've got to have a critical mass just to justify starting. And that's what we want to do. We want to help these MSPs just hit their run running with site-based pricing. And, if you need a couple hours of our time, we account for that more as a consultative kind of arrangement, but that makes it to where it's, you pay for what you need, not just to turn on the switch. And, absolutely. That's why we love working with, Ethica has been great. That's their whole model is, instead of waiting for these big guys to, get a partner set up and try to offer it in this way, they're ready to go. And, they're focused, on some different areas, but with these other three relationships that we've had, it all works well together. And if you don't need SD-WAN, you need WAN optimization. It's not you're not wasting your time. We right fit you with the right one, and you might grow into needing SD-WAN. Or if you start the other way, you might grow into WAN optimization. But it saves you a lot of time figuring out which of the tools are best for you, while still not having to make that capital investment to start.
So I just want to clarify, because I just got an email. Does Rob's company sell direct, or do they have a channel program? So you have a whole channel program. In fact, I don't know that you sell direct.
Yeah. So Alan Fortier, who I've actually worked with in the past for an OEM partner of Replify's that didn't make it. Their focus was an oil and gas company, and it died when price of a barrel went to $20 a barrel. Their whole business model imploded. Alan's been great to work with. We have a very similar background. Read up on Alan Fortier. He'll be the guy that most people interface when we start talking, building a relationship. But that's what we're focused on. And sales and engineering together, we're focused on that the same way.
And I didn't even realize that it was out. So I just see in my email thing, Alan, question.
Yeah.
Does Rob's company sell? I'm like, what a knucklehead. All right. So let's talk about the pricing stuff for a moment. With you made it sound like some of this stuff is just some software you put on a computer.
Yeah.
All right. So, give me the 15-second version. What can I do with the software that I put on my computer?
So,
is it SD-WAN?
Cloud access, the SD-WAN component, that cannot run on your computer. You do need to put that on a box that is in front of your firewall, essentially, between the modem and the firewall. That way you can plug up multiple connections to it. Replify, it can be deployed a couple ways. It can be deployed that same way where it's inline on a box, where you have kind of a IPsec, LAN to LAN type of setup.
Sure.
Or what I think a lot of MSPs would prefer is just push button deploying it. If you got Active Directory or some RMM tool and you've got a PC that you can install software on, you just install the client. It's the same technology that would go in a box, just as a Windows client. Roll it out that way.
Okay. And Replify, yes or no? Do we need to set up like a whole OVH server and all that to use Replify?
You do. It's a bookshelf component as well. So you're going to optimize a link. So there has to be something doing and undoing on both sides. And you can use OVH, DigitalOcean. It's a pretty lean system. So it's not a big investment by any means to spin up a server.
Oh, that's fine. Is Replify storing the data or anything that it's deduping?
So this is not object oriented. So there is no concept of a file or something that you could go in and cherry pick out of a library somewhere. There are chunks of data, but just like your packets flowing across your, connection, it's kept in a library in that format, so it can't be reassembled. You can even turn on encryption if you need, just to know for sure that all these chunks are encrypted. There's just no real need to it for most contexts, but it's not a long-term storage. So it's the more chunks are referenced, the more they float to the top of the byte cache, if you will. And then things churn out if they're something you've used once and no one else has referenced it.
So is Replify like working across the whole internet then for me? Like, if it sees I keep going to WordPress websites, it's going to keep loading some of the WordPress libraries, that kind of thing?
That purely depends. The great thing about it is you can put in, I want it to do something for a single server with a single IP address, and that's the only thing I want to do. You can say, I want to do this entire subnet, or I can do the entire internet as a whole, 0.0.0.0. It's going to intercept everything, and if it can optimize it, it will. If it can deduplicate it, it will. You can apply a lot of policies to different things, but there is a nice default policy we've got that fits most people's needs.
Would you say Replify is a nice dip your toe in the water and see if this is for you kind of thing before they dive in with SD-WAN with you guys?
I think it's definitely the easiest for us to let someone try it as a demo, where you don't need to worry about authentication or anything. We can spin up something, let you try it. If you want to try it, you can actually download it straight from Replify, but you've got to set up your own server, know how to configure it. We can do all that for you. Like I said, because we're a value-added distributor, get you better pricing. So yeah, it's something we can do on a just one-off basis. So if you want to try it on your laptop, we could get you the Replify client, and you don't have to worry about all this stuff in the background.
Let's say I'm a weirdo, Rob, and I want to just run Replify on my Mac.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about my clients or anything yet. But I don't want to try it for like the 10, 30, whatever days. I want this thing for the long haul. Mm-hmm. What am I looking at price-wise to get that through you?
I'm going to unfortunately have to defer that to Alan. If you're talking about a single user, we don't really sell it that way. We've got a
single user with the intention of eventually having more, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to run it myself for now, and then once I finally get it, Then I'm going to start selling it to my clients.
Yeah. So there's a price point for the server that we could, do an extended trial for, I think. And then, per user, we can license it to you perpetually if you want to just own it, or do a monthly. The monthly we got to assess based on volume. But,
Sure.
I'll put it this way. You get, when you do it that way, you get competitive with ExpressVPN Nord, on the per user pricing.
Gotcha.
So independent of your initial structure there.
So we're not at like pennies or something like that for an endpoint. We're probably talking $5 to $10 for an endpoint, depending on volume.
Yeah, depending on volume, absolutely.
And with this type of product, do we have to worry about like bandwidth or any of that stuff?
So wherever the Replify server component sits, it needs to be in a data center that has good throughput.
Let me rephrase. I don't have to pay per gig or anything. Replify, it's just software. It works.
That's what I want to make that very clear with both products. Cloud Access, Replify, there is no metered charge based on usage, and that is fundamentally different than most of the solutions you see out there today. Most people are charging per megabit or on some type of tiered pricing, and no, you absolutely not. Now, if someone has a use case, they want to build that model out and host it as a service themselves to do that, we can help an MSP provide that as a service, but no.
All right. And then SD-WAN type stuff. Let's say I'm going all in, Rob. I've got some clients. We need to get some SD-WAN. And it's not because we're trying to build an MPLS. We just want smarter internet and some additional security, right?
Right.
So what are we talking? We got to buy some hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Ballpark, how much does this hardware cost for a 10 to 25 user environment?
Yeah. In that type of environment, $200-$300, we can even tell you the Quotom type of model to go with. It's an easy one. We know it's vetted. It works well. If you want to buy it yourself and put the software on it, you're free to do so. So we're not actually trying to sell you hardware. We can and provision that, if that's easier to help your model. But a lot of people have access to the hardware they want to use. Put their sticker on it, my support number. You're their resource. You're the MSP. And we want to help you implement that. So you don't have to buy the hardware from us.
Okay. Well, no, and that's fine. I'm just trying to get like the big picture of,
right.
We're going to spend a couple $100, few $100 on some hardware.
Yep.
And then ballpark for the software or the SD-WAN service.
Mm-hmm.
Another couple $100.
Less than that. On a per site basis, less than that. Way less than that. If you're talking about a business,
less than $100.
This is where we need to connect you with Alan Fortier. He will take great care of you.
Man. Okay. He's squirrely with the pricing, guys.
Well, the one thing we're never going to do is try to get budgetary pricing out of you. We're not a Walmart where it's a one size fits all type of product, So we don't want to just put a pricing out there and have an expectation that it comes with the other things if you need those. So it's better to have a conversation.
Sure. No, and I get that. I guess I was just trying to get people under 200's good. I mean, it's 500 from the ISP. I mean, so, and then we still have to get the OVH server, whether it's Replify or Cloud Access. Does Cloud Access need a beefier OVH server than Replify?
I don't think so. It again depends on what you're doing. The reason I say that, we had a customer that had they were doing a game development, and I don't remember. I think it was Perforce was the name of the system they were making these commits to, but because they're doing some really large stuff back and forth, they needed a little bit beefier equipment. But their guys loved it, and they told me this was a good one. They told me that paid for the solution in like 2 weeks, just based on the fact that their developers were able to make the commits on time and not have to wait hours for uploads and downloads to occur, because they're only making small changes to some of these big, huge files. Think in that context, like CAD guys, those the files can get big, same thing with 3D rendering and stuff. So it does depend on the use case on the hardware, but for your typical user working from home, like I said, a couple $100 for the hardware.
Okay. So a couple $100 for the hardware. We're talking under $100 a month for the OVH for many of our typical clients, where especially if I'm talking the 10 to 25 user type of place. Like obviously the larger offices, maybe they need some kind of crazy server, multiple server. I don't know. Obviously we got to talk to you for the larger or the more interesting type of setups, but the typical 10 to 25 user office is what I'm kind of thinking of in my mind right now. And then final question, Replify and cloud access.
Mm-hmm.
Does it happen? Is it good?
Absolutely, man. It's
okay.
It's good. Not only can you stack and make the connection resilient, but you can optimize that combined link and just absolutely scream. It's awesome.
So now here's where it gets real interesting. What's running Replipit? Is it at the endpoints? Okay. Is it over an OVH? Is it on the same server as Cloud Access? Is it a different server? Where is it screaming more?
Okay.
Do I put it everywhere?
No. Yeah, put it everywhere, right? So my recommendation, as an engineer, I have to say depends, but I've had a lot of people try to integrate it so that it's running as a service on a same box with lots of other things on it. And, the cost of cloud servers today, especially if you're a MSP and you've got customers that are really going to use this, you put a dedicated controller there with Ethica, cloud access on it, one with Replify, and same thing with, the CPE side, put the cloud access there, on site on a box, but then just put Replify on the Windows or Mac machines that need it. You don't have to spend time putting it on the box. We really, I've seen more successful use cases where people are putting it on their machines, Replify, especially in the MSP environment, where you know what your customers want to have access to. And there's sometimes you've got that one application that's like a healthcare or the dentist environment. You want that to come over here, but for the rest of the internet traffic, you want it to go out somewhere else. And you can do all that with Replify. So it's been more successful to just deploy it where it's needed with specificity. And that's also where Netify helps. We've helped uncover some things on people's networks. We didn't really get a lot to talk about, Netify, but
that's so cool.
Yeah. What anomalies are on your network?
I want to have you back. I want to talk. I'm going to have you back 3 times because I'm going to have you come in. And I want you to bring the vendors, bring like the marketing person. That way they can explain it to me like I'm 5'2". Okay.
Absolutely. I think they will all embrace that because, I love working with MSPs, but the thing that I've learned about, it's hard to work with MSPs for these guys. That's why they focus on the bigger opportunities and it leaves MSPs behind. It leaves small businesses behind because of that. Because most SMBs are relying on that tech guy that they know and trust. So they would love to, talk directly to you and your audience.
Well, guys, you need to call Alan. Go over to leadfoottech.com. I'm going to put that up here. There you go. leadfoottech.com. It is a T in Leadfoot, not Leadfoot, not lead food. Okay. It's Leadfoot. When you go there, I believe, they've right on the homepage, it just says cloud, channel partner inquiries. You just shoot that an email and I believe it'll be Alan that responds. Alan will take care of you, get you, probably ask you a bazillion questions so that way they can understand your use case and then get you pricing and explain what you're getting and how to use it correctly and all that. And if we're just dummies with Linux, we can even pay a little extra and have you set it up for us. And
totally.
Cool. All right, Rob, this was awesome, man.
I'm
wait.
glad to talk with you, man. Very cool. Thank you for having us.
Yates said you should rebrand to SpeedNet.
SpeedNet? Hey, I'm all about helping maybe Yates Network do just that. Yates Network, give us a call and we'll help you get SpeedyNet up and going. Seriously.
You can call it SPDY Net.
People might not like that one, but
no, they might not like that one.
But
all right. Well, Rob, thank you. Everyone that was here, especially this whole time. We did over 2 hours today, but for the podcast, obviously, it's not that long. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, everybody.